The cameras hadn't even started rolling when whispers began spreading like wildfire. Across every corner of political media, something explosive had gone down at a private MAGA-only dinner, and at the center of it all were two women who almost never appear in the same headline, Usha, Vance, and Erika, Kirk. But tonight, their names were tangled in a storm big enough to shake the conservative world. Fans are shocked, insiders are scrambling, and sources close to the event say emotions ran so high that even the staff were left speechless. And the most unbelievable part, according to those who were there, Usha Vance broke down. It all started with one leaked photo, one grainy, dimly lit image that shouldn't have meant anything on its own. But when viewers zoomed in and sharpened it, they noticed Erika Kirk leaning forward across the table. Her expression tense, her hands gesturing sharply in mid-conversation. Across from her sat Usha Vance, J.D. Vance's usually composed and reserved wife, looking visibly shaken, her shoulders slightly hunched, her eyes red, struggling to focus. And that single moment, frozen in time, lit the match that would ignite a scandal bigger than anyone expected. Because what wasn't visible in the photo was the argument. According to insiders, the dinner was supposed to be a calm, elite, invitation-only strategy meeting, just a handful of top conservative voices discussing upcoming moves, influence, image, and of course, future power plays. But the atmosphere shifted the moment Erika Kirk walked in. Witnesses say she carried the energy of someone ready to confront, ready to expose, ready to take control of the narrative that had been slipping through her fingers since her growing beef with Candace Owens. And for reasons no one fully understood yet, her target that night was Usha. By the second course, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Guests whispered, glancing between the two women as Erika's tone became sharper. Her comments more personal, her questions hitting nerves no one expected to be touched at such an event. One attendee said, "You could tell Erika came to settle something. She wasn't there for politics. She wanted answers." But the real shocker came when Erika allegedly mentioned a private conversation she claimed to have had with J.D. Vance, one that, according to her, proved Usha was out of the loop on major decisions tied to J.D.'s rising national profile. That statement, delivered in a room full of powerful figures, was the trigger. Fans say the moment the rumor leaked online, people were stunned. How could Erika possibly have access to such personal information? What was her intention? Was she trying to embarrass Usha or expose something bigger? By dessert, witnesses say, Usha's voice was trembling as she tried to defend herself against accusations no one saw coming. And when the conversation flipped toward loyalty, marriage, and political image, something inside her cracked. Viewers online described the scene as unbelievable, cruel, and messy, even for reality TV standards. And before the night ended, Usha allegedly pushed her chair back, whispering, "Why would you do this?" And that is where the real story begins. Usha's whisper hung in the air like smoke, thin and trembling, but somehow heavier than anything that had been said all night. The moment those words left her lips, the table fell into a silence so sharp it felt like glass cracking. Even the servers who'd been quietly moving around the room froze, sensing a line had been crossed, a boundary shattered. Erika Kirk didn't blink. She just stared back at Usha with that sharp, unreadable expression that had already unsettled half the room. Her fingers still gently tapping the edge of her water glass like she was keeping tempo with the tension she had created. The whole atmosphere shifted, almost like the oxygen had been pulled out of the room. Guests leaned back in their chairs, exchanging looks that screamed this wasn't supposed to happen. Not here, not tonight, not with these people. But Erika leaned forward, her voice low but cutting, and said something that made multiple people gasp. Something so bold that even the most seasoned political strategists didn't know where to look. She said, "You know exactly why I'm doing this, Usha." And it wasn't the words alone, it was the confidence behind them. The implication that she held information no one else did. That she came into that dinner ready to detonate a bomb right at Usha Vance's feet. Usha's breath hitched, her chest rising and falling a little faster now, as if she was fighting to keep herself together. Fighting not to let the room see just how deeply the words were cutting her. Someone near the end of the table tried to lighten the moment, mumbling something about misunderstandings and long weeks and high stakes. But Erika ignored them completely. She kept her focus locked on Usha like she was waiting for her to crack open entirely. Another guest whispered, "Is this about JD?" to the person next to them. And that quiet question alone sent a ripple of panic through the room. Because everyone knew that if this had anything to do with JD Vance, the stakes weren't just personal. They were national, they were political. They had consequences beyond this dinner, beyond this table, beyond anything these guests ever intended to be part of. Usha finally inhaled deeply, wiping her fingers under her eye quickly like she was trying to hide the beginning of tears. She straightened her back a little, forcing confidence back into her voice as she said, "Erika, if you have something to say it privately, not here, not in front of them." But Erika's eyes flashed, and for a moment she almost smiled. Not a kind smile, but the kind you see when someone believes they've already won. She said, "Why would I say it privately, when the truth concerns everyone here? Why should they be kept in the dark about what's really going on behind the scenes?" And those words, truth, and everyone, echoed in the minds of every person present. Phones were suddenly silenced. Forks lowered. No one dared move. Usha shook her head slowly, her hair brushing her shoulders as she whispered, "Stop, please, just stop." But Erika wasn't done. She leaned back and crossed her arms like she was preparing for a showdown, her voice steady and deliberate as she asked Usha, "Do you really think the people in this room don't deserve to know how involved? JD has been in conversations you apparently knew nothing about." And that was it. That was the moment that shattered the last layer of calm Usha had left. Her eyes widened, her breath stumbled, and a faint tremor ran through her hands like her entire world had just tilted. Guests gasped. One woman covered her mouth. Another leaned to her husband and whispered, "Oh my God, is she saying JD confided in her?" Fans online would later say that was the moment everything changed. The moment Erika took the scandal from rumor to full-blown political earthquake. Because if JD really had private conversations with Erika, conversations that his own wife was unaware of, the implications were enormous. Personal betrayal, political betrayal, emotional betrayal, everything wrapped into one messy storm. Usha's voice broke as she said, "That's not true, you're twisting things." But Erika cut her off immediately, her tone sharper now. "Am I twisting things, or are you just realizing that JD tells other people things he doesn't tell you?" That line hit the room like thunder. Even people who didn't know. Usha well felt the pain behind her expression, the humiliation of being called out publicly in a room full of powerful onlookers. Tears pooled in her eyes, but she blinked hard, trying to stop them from falling. She whispered, "Why are you doing this, Erika? What do you want from me?" Erika leaned forward again, lowering her voice to a level that was almost intimate but far more dangerous. "I want you to stop pretending everything is perfect. I want you to stop acting like you're not worried. And I want you to finally admit that JD has been keeping things from you." Usha's breath faltered completely as the words landed. Several guests looked down at their plates, uncomfortable, unsure if they were witnessing a political confrontation or a marriage unraveling right, filled with sharp edges. As she said, "Then you should have listened to him when he tried to warn you what was coming." The entire room leaned in, stunned. What was coming? What had JD warned about? What did Erika know that Usha didn't? The mystery deepened with every passing second. And just as Usha opened her mouth to respond, the door to the private dining room swung open and the person who stepped inside made the entire room go silent all over again. The door didn't just open quietly, it burst inward with a force that made every head snap toward it at once. And for a split second, the only sound in the entire room was the faint clatter of silverware trembling on porcelain plates. The lighting from the hallway spilled into the private dining area, casting a long, sharp silhouette across the floor before the figure finally stepped inside. And when everyone saw who it was, the silence deepened into something thicker, more dangerous, as if the entire evening had been building toward this very moment. JD Vance. He stood in the doorway wearing the kind of expression people couldn't immediately read, somewhere between confusion, urgency, and an emotion darker than anything he usually allowed to show in public. His eyes scanned the room quickly, taking in the atmosphere, the tension, the clusters of stunned guests, and finally resting on the two women seated across from each other like opposing forces in a war he hadn't expected to walk into. Usha's tear-streaked face, Erika's sharpened gaze, the emotional wreckage sitting silently between them. He stepped inside slowly, closing the door behind him, and the faint click echoed like a shot. Everyone at the table shifted, uncertain whether to speak, stand, or pretend they hadn't just witnessed the emotional explosion that had unfolded minutes earlier. But JD made that choice for them. He walked straight toward the table with that heavy, measured pace that gave away far more than he wanted: tension in his shoulders, tightness in his jaw, and something in his eyes that suggested he already knew exactly what had happened, or at least suspected enough to make him dread this moment. Usha's voice trembled as she whispered, "JD," and her chair scraped softly against the floor as she instinctively tried to stand. But he gently lifted a hand, motioning for her to stay seated. That small gesture alone hit the room like another shockwave, because it wasn't cruel, just controlled, rehearsed, heavy with things unsaid. And everyone knew in an instant that whatever was happening tonight, JD was already in the middle of it long before he arrived. Erika leaned back, crossing her arms again as she watched him approach them. The faintest smirk tugged at the corner of her mouth. Not triumphant, but something closer to satisfaction, like she had expected JD to show up, like she wanted him here. Someone far down the table whispered under their breath, "Oh, this just got worse." And it did. Dramatically, JD pulled out the chair between the two women and sat down slowly, letting out a breath through his nose as he looked at Erika first, then at Usha, then back at the room of wide-eyed guests who were now gripping their wine glasses like they were parachutes. Finally, he spoke. "What did I walk into?" The question wasn't loud, but the weight behind it made everyone freeze. Usha inhaled shakily, wiping her cheeks quickly like she still hoped no one had seen her cry. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "JD, she said things about you, things I know aren't true." But Erika didn't wait for him to respond. She leaned forward, elbows on the table, and said, "JD, I was just clearing up a few misunderstandings, since your wife seems to believe everything is fine when we both know it hasn't been for a while." Gasps erupted again. One man muttered, "This is going to implode live." Another whispered, "Jesus Christ." JD closed his eyes for a moment, pressing his fingers against his forehead like he was trying to push back a migraine made of pure political fire. When he finally looked up, he stared directly at Erika and said, "I asked you not to bring this up publicly." And that sentence alone sent every guest spiraling into a silent panic. He had asked her, meaning they had spoken, meaning Erika wasn't bluffing, meaning everything Usha feared was suddenly real. Usha's breath caught. Her fingers tightened around her napkin as she whispered, "JD, what does she mean?" He didn't look at her immediately. That hesitation, barely 3 seconds, felt like an entire confession. Usha's face fell, her shoulders collapsing slightly as she realized that Erika hadn't been exaggerating. Something had happened. Something JD didn't tell her. Something he should have. Erika took advantage of the pause. "Of course." She tilted her head and said, "See, Usha, he didn't deny it. He didn't deny meeting with me. He didn't deny talking to me about things you weren't included in." And while her voice wasn't raised, it carried enough ice to make even the bravest political strategist want to crawl under the table. Jade's tone sharpened as he said, "Erika, that's enough." But Erika shook her head slowly, almost sympathetically. As she replied, "No, JD, she deserves to hear the truth, especially after you asked me to keep it quiet." Usha felt like the room was spinning. She whispered, "Keep what quiet, JD? What did you ask her to hide from me?" And her voice broke again, the kind of break that comes from fear, confusion, and heartbreak mixing into something too heavy to hold. JD looked at her finally, his eyes softening, but there was guilt in them, thick, undeniable guilt, and the room practically leaned forward, waiting for his answer. He said, "I didn't ask her to hide anything from you, I asked her not to bring it up tonight." "That's different." But Erika scoffed loudly. "Is it though? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you were trying to keep your wife out of conversations that directly affect her. Affect your family, affect everything." A wave of murmurs rippled through the table. One advisor whispered, "This is political suicide." Usha shook her head slowly, tears forming again. Her voice thin as she said, "JD, what conversations? What is she talking about?" JD opened his mouth to answer, but before he could speak, Erika interjected with a line so bold the entire room gasped. She said, "The conversation about your husband being pushed to take a role that would force him to distance himself from you publicly." Usha froze. Her face went pale. Her breath vanished. And the room erupted in whispers. One woman whispered, "Oh my God." Someone else said, "Is this about JD's political future?" And a third person murmured, "No way they would actually try that." But Erika wasn't finished. She leaned closer to JD and said, "You told me yourself. You were advised to create space between your personal life and your political strategy." And that means her. JD. Usha blinked rapidly, unable to process what she had just heard. Her voice wavered as she whispered, "You told her that, but not me. You told a stranger something about our marriage that you couldn't tell your wife." And that's when the first real tear fell, sliding down her cheek as the entire table watched her break in real time. Jade's voice trembled slightly as he said, "Usha, it's not what you think." But she cut him off, something snapping inside her as she whispered in a shaking voice, "Then what is it, JD? Because right now it sounds like you were planning a future without me." Her words hung in the air like a wound. The room fell into another thick silence, broken only when Erika exhaled sharply like she had been waiting for this very reaction. She said, "That's what I've been trying to make her understand, JD. She deserves honesty, not careful speeches crafted by your advisors." Usha covered her mouth, her breath trembling uncontrollably. JD looked at her with a mix of desperation and regret. He reached toward her hand, but she pulled back instantly, shaking her head. He whispered, please listen to me. But she whispered back, how can I when I don't even know what's real anymore? The entire table watched as the political power couple cracked open. As the woman who had always appeared so composed in public sat trembling, betrayed, humiliated, and blindsided, JD turned toward Erika, his voice dropping into a warning tone as he said, you've said enough, you've done enough. But Erika didn't look intimidated. Instead, she looked almost disappointed as she replied, I told you, Jesus, this isn't happening. But it was happening, and the timing couldn't have been worse or more explosive. The phone belonged to JD. Usha's eyes widened so sharply it looked like she'd been physically struck. Her trembling hand moved instinctively toward her chest, fingers curling into the fabric like she needed something to hold her together. Erika watched the entire moment unfold with a quiet intensity, her lips barely moving as she whispered, well, well, well. The call vibrated again, louder now in the suffocating silence. And everyone stared at JD, as if his reaction was going to decide the fate of the entire evening. JD didn't reach for the phone. He didn't blink, he didn't breathe, and that silence, his refusal to move, was exactly what terrified Usha the most. Finally, the phone stopped. The vibration ceased. The screen dimmed back to black, leaving a heavy void in its place. But before anyone could even attempt to process what that meant, the phone lit up again. Donald Trump. Calling again. Usha choked on her breath, whispering, JD, why? Is he calling you now? But her voice was so faint, so painfully fragile, that half the table nearly flinched hearing it. JD finally reacted, just slightly closing his eyes for a second, like the universe was taunting him. He reached for the phone but didn't pick it up. He just stared at the screen, jaw tightening, his thumb hovering over it but never touching. Erika leaned forward, her tone laced with venomous curiosity as she said, go ahead, JD, answer it. I'm sure it has nothing to do with this conversation at all. Usha looked at her with devastation, whispering, Erika, please stop. But Erika didn't. She wouldn't. She said in a sharp whisper, no, Usha, he should answer it because whatever he's hiding from you is tied to that phone call, isn't it, JD? The room erupted in soft gasps. JD finally snapped, enough, Erika. His voice cracked through the tense air like a whip, but the authority in his tone only fueled her further. She lifted a brow and said, then answer it, JD, show her there's nothing to hide. Prove to her you're not already halfway into a deal that leaves her out. Usha's lower lip trembled, and she pressed her palm against her cheek to wipe away a tear. Whispering, JD, please, just tell me what's going on. Please don't let me find out something like this in front of everyone here. The pain in her voice stabbed through the room with terrifying precision. The phone stopped ringing again. Silence, stillness, a storm waiting to break. And then it buzzed again. This time, a voicemail alert appeared. Everyone watched as the new notification slid across the screen. New message from Donald Trump. Someone at the table actually whispered, this cannot be real. Someone else muttered, we should not be here for this. Usha stared at the phone like it was a grenade about to explode. JD slowly turned the screen face down on the table, breathing heavily, trying to regain control. But Erika wasn't about to let him. She leaned forward and said, why did Trump call you 3 times, JD? What could be so urgent that he'd interrupt a private dinner, unless it was about the decision you haven't told Usha about? Usha's head snapped toward JD again. Her voice cracked as she repeated, decision, what decision, JD? Her fingers trembled against the tabletop, curled into a tight fist, now like she was trying to stop her world from collapsing beneath her. JD swallowed hard, finally looking at her, but he didn't speak fast enough. The silence between them was its own confession. Erika watched with the precision of someone who knew exactly the damage she was inflicting. She said, you should have told her, JD. You should have told her about the offer. Usha's voice shattered as she whispered, what offer? JD opened his mouth, hesitating, as if every word he might say could either save his marriage or destroy it entirely. But Erika spoke first. She said the offer for JD to be Trump's running mate, and the room exploded. Gasps, chairs scraping, frantic whispers. Someone dropped a wine glass and it shattered across the floor. The energy snapped so violently that even the servers at the doorway instinctively stepped back. Usha's breath left her body in one harsh, broken exhale. Her hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes widened until they glistened like glass. She whispered, JD. No, 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 tell me she's lying, tell me she's lying. JD shook his head immediately, but not in denial and torment. Usha's heart fractured on the spot. He whispered, I wasn't ready to tell you. And that was enough. She sobbed softly, broken, humiliated, devastated in front of elites, advisors, strategists, all witnesses to the collapse of her marriage in real time. But that wasn't the worst part. Erika leaned in, even closer, and said, "Don't pretend you weren't considering it, JD, you told me yourself last week you were thinking about accepting. You told me you were weighing the consequences. You told me Trump said keeping family distant would help the image. And you told me you weren't sure Usha was ready for that kind of shift." Usha's sob cut through the room like a slice of cold steel. Her shoulders shook violently. Her hand trembled against her lips. She whispered, "You talked to her about this, but not me. JD, please tell me this is twisted. Please tell me you didn't confide in her before me." Jade's voice cracked badly. "Usha, no, I wasn't confiding in her, it wasn't like that." But his explanation stumbled, faltered, collapsed. He looked like a man drowning in his own decisions. Erika leaned back, her voice almost calm, as she said, "He told me because he needed advice from someone who wasn't emotionally involved. And he knew you wouldn't take it well. And he was right." Usha sobbed harder, shaking her head desperately. "I'm your wife, JD. I deserved to know first. Not her, not anyone else. You promised we'd make decisions together." Her voice cracked so hard that even Erika's expression flickered with something like guilt, but only for a second. JD reached for Usha's hand again, whispering, "I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't want to tell you until I knew for sure. But that wasn't good enough." Usha's voice rose not loudly, but with a rawness that tore through everyone listening. "So you were going to decide first and tell me after? You were going to change our entire lives and hope I'd just follow along smiling behind you? JD, how could you?" The tension was so thick that even breathing felt like effort. Then suddenly JD's phone buzzed again, not with a call this time, but with a new notification. A message preview flashed across the screen before disappearing, but several people saw it. It read, "JD, we need to finalize the answer tonight. Call me back. Donald." Erika's eyes widened slightly. Usha's knees nearly buckled beneath the table. JD reached for the phone in a panic, turning it face down again. But the damage was done. Whispers shot across the table like wildfire. "He's already negotiating. Trump wants the answer now. Usha doesn't know anything. This is bigger than marriage. This is about power. This is about image. This is about control." Usha wiped her face with shaking hands, whispering, "JD, you've already decided, haven't you? You're just waiting for the right moment to tell me. JD, please tell me that's not true." Jade's lips parted. He inhaled. He hesitated. And that hesitation was the answer. Usha froze. Everyone froze. Erika sat back like she knew the evening had just crossed into irreversible territory. And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, completely broken, Usha said, "JD, if you walk into that role without me, you'll lose me." The entire table gasped again. Jade's face crumpled. Erika leaned forward, and before anyone could speak, the door opened once more. Someone new stepped inside, and the moment they appeared, the dinner didn't just shift, it detonated. The door didn't creak or ease open gently. This time, it swung wide with a sharp, urgent push. And every single person in the room snapped their head toward it as if bracing for impact. The tension was already unbearable, the kind that made even the air feel too heavy to breathe. But when the figure stepped inside, the room didn't just freeze, it ruptured. Because the person standing in the doorway was Erika's husband, Charlie Kirk. The collective gasp that tore through the room almost echoed off the walls. Even Erika jerked in her seat, sitting up straighter with a shock she couldn't hide. Charlie wasn't supposed to be there. He wasn't invited. He wasn't part of this dinner. And the look on his face, tight, furious, storming with confusion and accusation, told everyone immediately that he knew something was happening. Something big. Something he wasn't going to let unfold without him. The room shifted like a tide. Chairs scraped. Eyes widened. Whispers exploded instantly. "Oh no, why is he here? Does he know? Did someone call him? Oh God?" Erika's voice cracked first, sharp and alarmed. "Charlie, what are you doing here?" But Charlie didn't answer her. He didn't even look at the rest of the room. His eyes were locked on Erika like she was the only person in the world who existed at that moment, and not in a soft way, in a way that meant something had already happened before he walked through that door. Something that led him directly to this exact spot. Usha inhaled sharply. Her crying paused only because the shock temporarily stunned her. JD stiffened in his chair, straightening like he knew the entire but Charlie didn't repeat himself. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, and held it up. And there it was. A blurry, secretly recorded video of Erika at the dinner, leaning across the table toward Usha with an expression full of fire and hostility. Her voice was captured just clearly enough that the entire room could hear her say, "JD told me everything at that summit. The kind of things a wife should know." Gasps exploded again. Someone covered their mouth. Someone else actually stood up in shock. Usha's eyes welled all over again. JD froze like his heart had stopped beating entirely. Erika shot up from her chair, nearly knocking over her glass. "Charlie, where did you get that? Who recorded that?" And her voice wasn't sharp, this time it was panicked. Charlie didn't lower the phone. He didn't blink. He said, "I got it from someone I didn't even know. Someone who said your behavior tonight would embarrass all of us." And then he stepped closer, his voice trembling with disbelief as he added, "Erika, what are you doing? What is this? Why are you attacking Usha like this? And why is JD even involved?" The room spiraled. Whispers shot in every direction. Someone exclaimed, "This is out of control." Another whispered, "Who leaked it?" Another murmured, "There goes all confidentiality." Usha's tear-streaked face turned toward Charlie with confusion, desperation, and something close to gratitude. He wasn't there for her, but he was a sudden shield between her and Erika's relentless attack. JD looked at the table, unable to lift his eyes as the reality of the situation became clearer and clearer. Someone had recorded everything. Someone wanted to expose the dinner. Someone wanted this moment to explode publicly. Erika finally snapped, her voice cracking as she hissed, "Charlie, you don't understand what's happening. You have no idea the pressure JD is under. You don't know what he told me." And Charlie's head whipped toward JD with such force that half the room winced. He stared at JD like he was waiting for him to deny everything, to stand up and assert that Erika was lying, manipulating, twisting, but JD didn't speak. His silence was a confession all its own. Charlie's chest rose and fell sharply as he whispered, "JD, what did you tell my wife?" JD swallowed, gripping the edge of the table, trying to find something to say, but how do you explain this? How do you explain secret political discussions with another man's wife? Discussions your own wife wasn't even aware of. Jade's voice barely existed when he said, "Charlie, it wasn't what you think." But Charlie scoffed, loud, angry, disbelieving. "Really? Because what I think is that you went behind your wife's back and mine to talk to Erika about something that affects both families. And you let her walk in here and tear apart your marriage in front of everyone." Erika snapped back immediately, "Charlie, I wasn't tearing apart anything, I was trying to tell her the truth she deserved to know." But Charlie turned on her so sharply the room practically recoiled. He said, "You don't get to decide what truth she deserves when you're out here recording private conversations and spreading them to strangers." His voice cracked again. "Or letting them be recorded." Erika's eyes widened. "I didn't record anything. I didn't leak anything." But there was fear in her voice, now real fear, the kind that comes from knowing the damage was already done, whether she caused it or not. Someone at the table finally spoke up, a shaky voice asking who else here knew about this. And that question whispered through the room like poison. Because someone had filmed them. Someone had shared it. Someone was watching the power players implode and enjoying every second. Usha suddenly pushed her chair back, standing abruptly, her breathing unsteady and fast. She said in a voice trembling with pain and fury, "I can't do this. I can't sit here while you all argue about who recorded what when my entire marriage is falling apart right in front of me." JD stood immediately, reaching for her arm. "Usha, please." But she stepped back violently, shaking her head. "No, don't touch me, JD. I trusted you. And you told her before you told me. You let her humiliate me. You let her tear me apart in front of this entire room because you didn't have the courage to talk to me privately." Jade's voice cracked badly. "I was trying to protect you." But Usha's eyes were full of disbelief. "Protect me by lying to me. Protect me by confiding in Erika. Protect me by letting Trump make decisions that affect our family without even telling me." Charlie exhaled shakily, running a hand through his hair like he was trying to hold himself together. He said, "Erika, you told me you were going to that summit alone for professional reasons. Not to meet with JD privately." And Erika's face fell, even further, her confidence shattering under the weight of the truth. Jade's phone lit up again. Every head turned automatically. The new message flashed across the screen before fading out. "We need an answer tonight. National strategy depends on it." The entire room went silent. Usha whispered softly, almost lifelessly, "JD, answer one question for me, just one. If Trump forces you to distance yourself from me publicly, would you do it?" JD didn't answer. Usha blinked slowly, the way someone blinks when their world has finally collapsed. She whispered, "I knew it." Her voice barely more than a breath. Charlie stared at JD like he was seeing a stranger. Erika watched everything crumble with a look that flickered between guilt and stubborn conviction. The room held its breath. And then, Through that thick, suffocating silence, someone spoke from the back of the room. A voice the table hadn't heard. A voice no one expected. "They said you all need to sit down, there's something bigger happening here." Every head jerked toward the doorway. And standing there was someone whose presence meant the dinner wasn't just a scandal anymore, it was now a full-blown political emergency. As the night spiraled toward an ending no one could have predicted, the room that had once been filled with political confidence and subtle whispers now felt crushed under the weight of shattered trust, broken alliances, and a future none of them had planned for. Every person seated at that long glossy table understood that they had witnessed something historic. Something personal and political blending into a storm that would leave every member of that room changed forever. Usha stood there trembling, her heart cracked open publicly in a space where vulnerability was never supposed to be shown. Her pain echoing louder than any scandal. JD looked at her with a regret so deep it seemed to hollow out the room. Yet even in his silence, even in his desperate attempts to repair what was falling apart, the truth lingered like smoke. He had made choices without her. He had spoken to others before her. He had kept the most life-altering conversation of his career out of their home. Erika stood iced in the glow of her own decisions, her conviction wavering as consequences grew heavier by the second. Charlie's disappointment sinking into her bones, his eyes telling her he no longer recognized the woman standing before him, and the mysterious figure now stepping forward from the shadows only confirmed one thing: this wasn't the end of the drama. This was the beginning of something far more twisted, far more public, far more explosive than any of them had imagined. For the first time in her life, Usha Vance stepped away from the table, not as the calm, composed woman the public always saw, but as someone fighting to hold on to the last pieces of herself. Every whisper in the room followed her. Every pair of eyes softened, even those who had been part of the chaos. Her story was no longer just private heartbreak, it was a collision of ambition, loyalty, betrayal, and power. JD reached for her one final time, his voice breaking as he whispered, "Please don't walk away from me." But Usha didn't stop. She didn't answer. She didn't look back. Because in that moment, she understood something no strategist, no advisor, no political force could change. If JD was willing to choose a future that erased her, she would choose herself instead. And as she stepped beyond the doorway, the man behind her, the one who had sworn to protect her, stood in silence. Knowing this scandal wouldn't just define his political future, it would define his marriage, his family, and everything he had built until now. As the doors closed behind her, the entire room remained frozen, stunned by the fallout of the night. Charlie stared at Erika with a heartbreak that made even the coldest guest look away. Erika, for the first time, had no words. The mysterious newcomer cleared their throat, reminding the table that the world outside those walls was moving fast. Hungry for answers, hungry for leaks, hungry for drama. And whether any of them liked it or not, this dinner, this meltdown, this confession, this unraveling was about to become the #1 whisper across the country. And now, viewers, this is where you come in. Because this story isn't ending here. Secrets were revealed tonight, but even bigger ones are waiting to surface. Decisions were made, but the consequences are only beginning. Families were shaken, alliances fractured, and somewhere beyond those private dining room walls, people with far more power are preparing their next move. So tell us what you think. Should Usha walk away for good, or should JD earn back her trust? Was Erika exposing the truth or creating chaos for her own agenda? Did Charlie arrive as a hero or just another man blindsided by the hidden world of backstage politics? And most importantly, do you believe JD will choose his marriage, or the role Trump is pushing him to accept? Drop your thoughts, your theories, your predictions in the comments right now. Tell us what shocked you the most, what twist you didn't see coming.